so far. Heading on to 91. I'm not up to John yet. John's 94 this year, and let me tell you, he saw a lot after Pearl Harbor, and he saw most of the world, if not all of the world. I saw enough of the world. I'm a New Englander. I grew up in Massachusetts in an old New England family, going back to the Mayflower, so I was steeped in American history. My grandfather was in World War I, and uncles and cousins and everybody else were fighting in every war, and we had all the stories and so forth and so on. I had a wonderful childhood, a family of 6 plus one we added in 1939 when his parents were killed in an auto accident, and he became our 4th son until he went into the service. We were, as a family in those days, it was the Depression, it was hard times, it was hard work, it was ethics, it was faith, it was church, it was do unto others as you do unto yourself. It was the Boy Scout motto, and I was a Boy Scout and made Eagle back in 38 or 39. I was born in 27 and entered the service at age 16 because my 3 older brothers had already gone in. The day after Pearl Harbor, my first brother, the adopted one, although he kept his own name, Paul, joined the Navy, and unfortunately at Midway in 1942 on the Yorktown, he was killed by a kamikaze pilot. That was my first brother I lost. My second brother entered the Army, became an infantry and a darn good infantryman, and was forward scout for the 29th Division, landing at D-Day, but unfortunately a phosphorus shell killed him in Aachen, October 7, 44. He was about 3.5 miles from me and never knew that I was in the service. My third brother was a B-17 pilot with 28 missions and 5 air medals, crashed 4 times, but always survived in England bombing Germany. He died last year, but he had a wonderful life. I had a buddy from first grade, Benny, and Benny and I did everything together with our local gang of kids. But we were on the hockey team together. He was left wing, I was right wing. And we were pretty good, but Git Priestley, who was our center and played for the Bruins later on, was better. But we were cross country and track. We were good boy sopranos, believe it or not, and we got paid to sing in a church in Boston. And while we were on all day Sunday sometimes, once a month usually, we had to stay there all day, so we had plenty of time to get some history in. And we visited the Constitution regularly. We went to the Faneuil Hall Market. We went to the graveyard and looked at Paul Revere's grave, and looked at a lot of other history in the market squares of Boston. So that was my background. Family-wise, we discussed it. Every night was formal dinner in my home with linen cloth from my mother, self-cleaned and self-ironed. But we would listen to the news precisely and then discuss the news and daily items from school or whatever. And if a subject of importance such as the Japanese attack in 1935 in Manching, China, and the rape of the Chinese people, the beginning in Japan of the war. At the same time, things were happening in Germany with Hitler, and we would discuss them. So we were engrossed as kids in the war and had an excitement about wanting to serve our country because of the veterans we met who came to school and gave us our red poppies every year from Flanders Field in Belgium. So 16, Phinney and I enlisted and went to infantry school, Camp Crop, Carolina. From there, we did well enough in an advanced course and accelerated course because they were trying to get bodies together for the landing at D-Day. We then went to Fort Benning for Ranger Paratrooper School and succeeded in that, and they then sent us down to Fort Bragg, and we got the accelerated course for Special Forces. It wasn't called Special Forces at that time, it was OSS, the Office of Strategic Strategies. And Wild Bill Donovan was the leader. And following our success there in April of '44, we shipped over to England, went to Scotland and got advanced landing and other training by the British commandos and getting ready for D-Day. D-Day came, I was attached from the 75th Regiment, 2nd Battalion of the Rangers to the 29th Division, second wave, and we landed on Omaha Beach, second wave, Phinney and I together. We made it to the beach. That could take me a 2-hour story, but it's a wonderful adventure, but it was a hell of an awakening about what war is all about. Talk about being afraid, talk about fear, talk about anger, talk about everything, talk about blood, death. Normandy had it all. For Normandy, we went through all of the Normandy battle and all 5 battles in Germany. The Battle of the Bulge, the Rhineland, the Hürtgen Forest, and in between those battles with the Special Forces, I was a member of the OSS and made 21 missions back at the enemy lines, dropping by parachute, once walking in to where we had to go, and twice taking a rubber raft across the Rhine River to get to our location. But we successfully completed 21 missions, including 2 missions in February of '45 to prove for Churchill and Roosevelt that the death camps existed. And we made a total, with one Polish team, we made visits to Belsen, Buchenwald, Auschwitz, and Dachau, and got, with a signal man attached to us with photographic distance lens, pictures of the proof of the death camp people digging the hole and then being shot and dropping in the hole, lining up and going in naked into the Creon gas chambers, or being half dead or dead. They used some of the half dead ones to ram them, and it took prisoners to do the ramming, can you imagine, of their own Jewish dead or near dead people into the furnaces. We were able to photograph and prove all of those on those missions. My first bronze medal came at St. Lo when I became a leader. This was the 26th of July in '44, less than a month after our landing and a month and a half after the landing on D-Day. We had gotten through the hedgerows, and we had a mission of knocking out a very important machine gun and mortar, plus 88 millimeter gun emplacement. And unfortunately, in the Battle of St. Lo, which was a tough battle, the city was totally destroyed. The lieutenant and the sergeant in charge of us were both either killed or wounded, and the rest of the team, we had 24 in the team that day, including them. So we were down to 22, and everybody was looking around. I was a young kid. The others were mostly older than me. But everybody was saying, well, what do we do now? And I said, and nobody said anything for about 30 seconds. And I spoke up and said, well, we damn well better finish the mission, hadn't we? And so I started telling everybody what to do, and I had them shoot and protect me, and I took a lot of grenades and the Tommy gun and skirted around the end, and I wiped out with the grace of God four sites, and then did a little reconnoitering beyond that to find out what else was around that our headquarters may want to know about. So that was the day I became a leader at the age of 17. They made me a corporal that day. On all kinds of battles going north and into Belgium and all of that. But let's get to Aachen. I got to watch my time. You don't have until 6 a.m. And I can go until then.
We'll take a break, okay? 5 more minutes, we'll take a break.
5 more minutes, all right. 5 more minutes to tell you about my buddy Phinney and Aachen. It's hard to tell about Phinney. We were very close buddies. Our mission in Aachen was a bloody battle. Most battles bloody. It took us 2 months to take Aachen. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. The Germans ahead, we ahead, pushing us back, pushing us almost 100,000 casualties between the Germans and us. Just in Aachen. Just in Aachen. Our mission, a team of 24 again, and our mission was to take out a major square in the city where 5 major roads went through the courtyard, great big circular town square with a fountain in the middle, and the roads cutting through. But those roads were critical roads for many divisions. And General Hubner and Bradley needed us to take it out. The Germans had control of it. Across the square they had 5 buildings, primarily 2 stories high, except for 1 3 stories high. They had machine gunners, they had snipers, they had mortars, and a couple of streets being back of that, within a mile, they had a couple of tank and 88 gun placements, so they could lob guns. We had decided with our team who was going to take out. You have those 2 windows, you have that door, you have that roof to get out that mortar and take care of the mortar with a launcher, not a handgun, a grenade launcher, excuse me. So we had pretty well decided what was going to happen. But Phinney and I were standing or kneeling on the side of a building, and an 88 shell landed about 20 feet in front of us. And a piece of shell about this big came through my helmet and my liner, and rather than going through my brain, I guess I'm hard-headed, it bounced out and came out the top. It just knocked me out and I fell down to the ground. When I came to a few minutes later, I immediately looked over for Ben, who was less than a foot and a half away from me, and a big piece of shell had hit him here and taken his head off. Much of the rest of the mission I only learned about from others because I went into such a rage and shock. I didn't know what I was doing. But we completed that mission. And I knocked out with the guys covering and protecting me again. I got over them somehow in the name of the Lord was with me. I grenaded and machine gunned and shot my way from building to building to building, and I killed 19, captured 4, including a captain, and frankly didn't know a thing about it for 2 or 3 days. I was given off to rest. But that was a tough break. Time to quit for a break, and then we'll continue.
What'd you tell your mother you were doing when you were 16 and 17?
I told her, I promised her, she didn't want me to, well, God, my brothers before they went in, all 3 separately, went in separately. And each of them, because there was a year and a half, almost 2 years between those 3 and my sister and I, the 2 young brats in the family. And each of my brothers who went in the service came to me before they went in and said, listen, kid, you're not to go into the service. You're to stay home and take care of your sister and your mother and father. Your brothers and I are going in to fight the Japs and the Germans, and we don't want you. You're the last son in this family. We don't want you going. Promise me you will not go in. I promised them I would not go in. That was my brothers. My mother and father gave me permission with great regret. But they did. They were honorable people, and they knew that I really sincerely wanted to go. I was so gung-ho. But my mother wrote to the congressmen and senators asking them to keep me out of combat. I went to the general and said, General, I don't care what the senators are saying or what my mother is saying. Phinney and I joined up to fight, and we damn well want to go and fight. And the general says, you win, you're sure as hell gonna go and fight. And we did. But it was, when I wrote home, I never wrote a letter to my mother from combat. I always said I'm stuck in the background someplace, typing papers or delivering mail, and madder than hell I can't get into it. But they got me in this job, and that's the story. So.
It's not done. We'll be back. We're going to just take a 5.
That I had 21 of the missions back of the enemy lines. Each time that we came off a mission, my teams, although I changed men depending on the mission that we were on occasion. I mean, if I needed a mortar man, I got a mortar man. If I needed a machine gunner, I got a machine gunner. If I needed an explosive expert for a bridge, I got an expert explosive man. I had the ability to call Corps and any division that was nearby, say, I want your best man, to borrow him, and I was able to do that by the grace of God. The men didn't like it too often, but they served me well and honorably. But at any rate, wherever we came off a mission, I then joined that division for a period of time. Now, sometimes we joined it so we just rested, and we'd take 3 or 4 days or a week and just catch up with ourselves after a rough mission. But other times, if they're in the middle of a battle, we had to pitch in and help them. So I served with not only the 21 missions that we did back to the enemy lines, but I served with 54 divisions, including Canadian, British, Polish, and mostly American, during the period from June 44 through March of 45. My last mission in March of 45 was my toughest. Maybe Benny's was tough, but this was tough too. The Germans had lost the war. This was March of 45. The war ended in April of 45. They were losing, we were moving, but they were really getting desperate. And General von Brunstad, head of the 106 Panzer Brigade and another 20-odd divisions that he still had left, was planning one final push, we knew. But we didn't know when, we didn't know what he had left, we didn't know what his supplies were. And General Eisenhower and General Montgomery ordered my team to make a drop to cover a 25 square mile area in twos, crisscrossing after we laid out the whole plan for the 25 square miles. But crisscrossing in twos, 14 of us all told, 7 teams, and to meet in the end of 5 days with all the information gathered, what divisions they were, what outfits they were, what armor they were, what artillery they were, what equipment they had, what supplies they had, how much gas did they have, where they had tanks, where they had machine gun locations, where everything was. It was a tough job because the 106 and those divisions were there and knew that we were there working around. As a matter of fact, 3 of my men in those first 5 days were wounded. And when we met on the 5th day to put it all together and to get it back to the headquarters, we were missing those 3 men, and we first had to backtrack. We knew everybody's route. So we backtracked to find our 3 men. We found those 3 men and got all of our information together. I sent one man that I trusted because he was great in sneaking through places, Izzy. And Izzy got through for me with the information, and the mission was a success. But the 106 Panzer Division knew that we were there. And we made noise and walked into them to take the action away from Izzy so he could get out, and we ended up surrendering with the hope that our troops would catch up fast enough to be able to protect us. Well, they didn't catch up fast enough. And the next 2 weeks were, at least the first week, were tough. They immediately shot the 3 wounded men in front of all of us. And then they started 8 days of torture, day and night, for the rest of us, trying to get me to talk and divulge what we had. And my men took that torture. We all were hung by our feet and our wrists. My thumbs were separated. We were beaten not only by henchmen. They would get 5 great big burly German SS guys and take each of us individually with the 5, and the 5 would just beat us up until we couldn't walk or talk. We had ice baths daily, an hour and a half of lying in ice, and that's no fun. We had waterboarding, and waterboarding is nothing compared to what some other things are. We had electrical treatments on our genitals, and we had ramrods up our butts, and then they added electricity to that. We all had rifle butts and truncheon treatments, and none of us could walk at the end of 7 days. I had a separated hip, 2 separated shoulders, 2 broken clavicles, both my right and left clavicle. I had 7 cracked ribs. I had a cracked neck, and I had internal and black and blue. The rest of them I had, and a concussion. On the 8th day, our troops were beginning to catch up, and they were getting desperate. They were burning their records and getting ready to prepare to move out. They pulled my men in, just dragged them in front of me and said, "Are you ready to tell us anything but your name, rank, and serial number?" And I said, "Hell no." And they shot the man in front of me. And they shot 7 of them that day. And I went into a coma. The shock was so much that my brain just told me, go to sleep. And I went to sleep. And they thought I died, and they left me and 2 others for dead and took off. I don't know. It was several days, almost a week, before our troops caught up with us and found us. And I ended up in the hospital in England, but I was still in a coma and didn't get out of the coma for 59 days. And when I came out of the coma in the 104th Military Hospital in England, when I came out of the coma, I didn't know my name. I had lost all of my memory. And so for the next 7.5 months, besides having traction and you know, I was like a piece of concrete with stuff taking care of the breaks and separations and everything, and internal injuries. They started giving me 2 shots of truth serum, pentathlon serum, every day in my back with the doctors and psychiatrists, and with my record that they were allowed to get out of SHAFE headquarters, and to try to use that record to try to see if they could recall some of my memory. Well, by the end of 7.5 months, I did remember my family. I did remember maybe at that time, 7.5 months, November, maybe 40 to 50% of what I used to know. And they told me everybody, this is November of 45, everybody was going home, the war was over, everybody was going home triumphantly, and they said, "You're due to be sent home for a visit with your family, but we want you to sign up. We literally order you to sign up for another 3 years because you're only half done with your rehab, mental and physical." So I signed for another 3 years in the occupation in Germany. Went home, spent a month there, but it was a month of hell because I was trying to hide, because I was still lying to my folks. and trying to explain. And I went to high school to see kids because I thought maybe I just enjoy being there at high school. It was a dumb move because they I was the hero, come home and tell me the story, then I go home and have a nightmare at night and wake up the family. And anyhow, that's the beginning of a long road that went through the occupation and Russia and Korea. But anyhow, it's been a pleasure to be here tonight and give you